I did see things that started to raise questions for me of going, all right, is this really, appropriate and proper behavior?
Like what kind? Do you remember any specifics?
So, yeah, there are actually very serious ethical things the CIA gets into sometimes. For example, there's a situation in which we wanted to recruit a private banker who worked on accounts for certain collection of Middle Eastern countries, because they could give us access to who moves the money, who are the high rollers, what are they spending it on, and that can then enable other recruitments and that sort of thing. But we didn't really have
a Swiss banker.
Yes, but he's actually he is. I think he had Swiss residency, but he wasn't necessarily a Swiss citizen. It gets very gray out there.
But I mean, the idea was he worked at a Swiss bank.
Yes, he worked at a Swiss bank.
Information about
and NSA wanted to know what was going on in these private banks, these Swiss banks, that won't cooperate with us through other means. So we would try to engineer, ways to get somebody to be his friend, to really sort of develop a closeness with them. And there are, a lot of traditional legal ways we go about this, and then some that are less legal. In this case, they went out and, they made friends with the guy. They invited him to parties. He wasn't a really suave or sophisticated guy, so he wasn't that great. So they matched him up with a case officer who wasn't necessarily suave and sophisticated. And they developed sort of a relationship, but it wasn't really deep.
Was the case officer undercover?
Yes, he's there. I mean, there are no CIA employees overseas who are not undercover. Right. That's rule one.
But I mean, like when they approach him, when they're developing this friendship, does this banker know that he's dealing with someone?
No, he thinks he's working with somebody from the Department of State.
Right.
They work at the embassy. They've got a really bland diplomatic cover title. And they don't really talk about their work because they're trying to form that connection before they pitch you and go, hey, work for us.
Right.
So they had created the connection, but it wasn't deepening to the point where they felt like he was pitchable. So what they did was they engineered getting him really drunk and sending him home to drive, and he got in an accident where he was fine. But when you're in Switzerland and you're drunk and you get in an accident, there's an arrest, and you're not allowed to drive. There's licensing restrictions and everything like that. And our case officer, who was involved in setting this up, was basically right there to volunteer. Hey, I feel really bad about what happened to you. I let you drink too much. I'm going to give you a ride to work all the time from now on. I'm going to, let me help you repair your car and so on and so forth. And it was those kind of things where I went, all right, we're intentionally destroying people's lives to put them in vulnerable positions.
And these are things that you're learning because you're just
exposed to the information.
You're just seeing the communiques and emails and things.
And occasionally we're all friends. Right, so you talk to these guys and they're saying what's going on. And some of them are bragging about it.
Right.
And there is a part of human nature that actually wants to be a part of that, because it's trickery. You're going, hey, we're really getting over on these people. We're doing this in a sophisticated, smooth way, and it feels very Hollywood. You get a sense of accomplishment, but it's very difficult when you're in that environment to take a step back from that and ask the questions of, but was it okay? Was it worth it? Particularly for people who we think they may have information of value, but we don't know it. You can recruit these guys, and it's totally not worth it.
But there's something, even if you're not having this conscious, ethical debate with yourself, there's just something that starts not sitting well with you when you start hearing
and that was the thing. It's not necessarily that you go, I'm going to change this immediately, but you start questioning the capabilities and going, how far does this go?
Right.
Because I'm still only seeing this tiny corner.
Sometimes by accident, sometimes just arbitrarily you're discovering it, in ways that are pretty low level and banal still, right?
And whenever you bring it up, people tell you, hey, you need to simmer down on that. This is the way things work. We're doing this for an important reason. It's sort of that our intentions are beyond reproach, and therefore our methods can't be questioned because the work is so vital.
And it's sort of like a pattern that there's, as you were sort of saying, that every time you're encountering something that makes you a little uncomfortable, that seems a little over the line or at least dubious, it's always justified by this sort of broader good that everybody just instinctively believes in, who's part of it. As you say, it's not a conscious evil. It's this is for a positive end,
and they legitimately believe it.
No, it's not.
It's not fakery or anything like that. And it's the other thing that you start to see is once you get into these higher and higher levels of classification, there's less and less oversight, and there's more oversight by process as opposed to oversight by particular issues. And whenever there is something questionable, people try their best to limit the oversight on it. They overclassify it and they put additional caveats and things like that to prevent that kind of scrutiny. Because again, they go, look, these oversight guys are going to kill us here, and this needs to get done. So yeah, those things really, they really start to raise concerns. At least they did with me.
So were you starting to feel actively kind of uncomfortable with?
Yeah, I was actually beginning almost a sort of open revolt where I would raise these concerns with leadership figures and they would tell me to shut up. And I would follow the chain of command and go a level beyond, which would really piss people off. But it was what you were supposed to do.
You would raise concerns and objections. I mean, because these kind of things were clearly outside the purview of your responsibilities,
yes,
right?
And that was one of the biggest
were doing
things.
To recruit people, whether that was ethical or sort of proper, was not what you were there to assess, right?
Yeah, and so that's where they bring you into a meeting and they basically give you that's not your job.
Right.
You're not an auditor, you're not an inspector general. You're not supposed to be paying attention to this. You need to focus on these very narrow boundaries of sort of technical work and stop going beyond that.